Cayano and Rue. Councilwoman Martinez will not be joining us today, and I do expect Mr. O'Farrell to join us in a little while. So we do have a quorum, so we're going to get started at this point, and we'll start. I've got a few items I wanted to take on consent, but we have some multiple speaker cards. We've got, we'll start with Mr. Herman.
It's my time, bro. 3 minutes?
Okay. 2 minutes for comments and then 1 minute for general public comment. 2 minutes, you have multiple items. Go ahead.
So, you know, when you run into troubles regarding statements submitted to the community impact, you need to call 213-269-6000. This way, we can ensure that our protection under the Attorney General is addressed at 269-6000. And in addition to relative comment, you see, we're stuck between Anaheim Street and Alameda Street, somewhere off of De La Torre Jr. Avenue, because I keep trying to ask Janice Hahn to help us support and bring the Angels to Long Beach. It would be a suggestion based on credibility that we can win, and she will win too, except she's under an FBI investigation for Seabreeze. And then, in addition to CD1, the city engineer report relative to vacate the stadium and way off of Chavez is an issue of racial profiling. And you know why? Because people looked down at Chavez Ravine when the Dodgers came in as Brooklyn, and they took all us wetbacks off the hill and threw us off the hill and created Dodger Stadium at Chavez Ravine. And that's why Chavez Ravine is racist, anti-Semitic, fucking racism to the boner, the way Bonin likes my boner, and the same way O'Farrell likes boners, but that's a different story. Now in CD8, Joe Busciano, amending console, fuck Joe Busciano and fuck 103rd and Compton, you stupid pig. Oink, oink. General public comment. There's been issues around this kiosk, and it needs to stop. Not only are you violating free speech by censorship, but you're creating an atmosphere of censorship, period. Not addressing the Brown Act, not addressing the so-called Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act of 2004. And that's the reason why, when your rights are violated at City Hall, call that stupid motherfucker, Javier Becerra, the Attorney General, at 213-269-6000, and tell that stupid wetback to send those fucking buses to the border, and let's bring all these fucking illegal immigrants to our sanctuary cities, and let's load up on all these fucking sanctuary cities, all this illegal wetbacks like that fucking Jew up there with the black wife, nigga.
You done? Next, we have Wayne from Encino.
So, as usual, we get to number one, Mindy. We have Mindy Sarin. No financial disclosure done. No background done. Nobody gives a fucking shit. Look at these fucking four fucking clowns up here. They don't give a fuck. They'll put anybody on these commissions these days. Then you get number two, alley repair. We got an alley between Aura Avenue and Shirley South on Van Owen Street, and we need that fucking alley repaved. We've needed repaved for 30 years. Now, Bob Blumenfield, you can go ahead and start fixing that alley because 2 years ago, I drove through that fucking alley and it ruined my goddamn transmission on my fucking Mini Cooper. Because you got all of this dirt and shit and all of this replacement stuff that goes on. Now, finally, you want to know how much alley miles and an estimated cost of repairs. We just want you to fix it. Get Harris Dawson the fuck off of that. This is CD3. It only applies to Jews. We do not want the Goyim involved in this goddamn motion. Fuck the Goyim. Let's get the Jews to fix the streets for other Jews in the 3rd District. Then we get the maintenance of unimproved median islands. Well, Bob knows all about that because Bob's got all kinds of islands over there on Louise. He's got all kinds of them on Welby Way, and he lets them become shit. And it all started with that fucking gay faggot design. So let's get the money on number 6 and number 2, and let's make things nice for all of us motherfuckers. And then my fucking general comment, the pig cunt with the lipstick, Nuri Martinez, has continued to chair her meetings and not call speaker cards that were submitted for 4 meeting days. So we had to have a little kerfuffle about it. Your committee meeting member, a member of your quorum, likes to violate the fucking Brown Act.
You need to stay items within this committee.
And she's not on this committee? She's on this committee.
Items in the jurisdiction of the committee, not the individual members.
Really? Because why is she allowed to serve on this committee if she's breaking state law? We should have her removed permanently from this committee.
Your last warning. Items within the jurisdiction of this committee.
And gay Joe Buscaino with that gay yellow tie, we really have to start doing something about it. If you're going to come out, come out. Do you like pussy or do you like cock?
Time's up. You're done. For the record, I think it's a nice tie. Next, we have Ms. Claudia Whitman. You're here. You've signed up for 3 different items, and so this is our multiple speaker item. You're here to speak on items 6, 12, and 13. Is Ms. Whitman here? Nope. Okay. Then we will move. The other ones are on specific items, so that allows us to move forward. Unless there's an objection from my colleagues, and for the record, Mr. O'Farrell has joined us as well. Welcome. Unless there's an objection, I'd like to move items 7 through 14 on consent. Yep. No objection?
No objection. I just have a comment after we approve, though.
Oh, okay. So without objection, then items 7 through 14 are moved on consent. Mr. Buscano, you had a comment on that?
I can, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for advancing item 12 that we just approved in naming portion of Eubank Avenue between Anaheim and Alameda, George De La Torre Jr. Avenue in Wilmington. Been instrumental in the economic development with Juanita Foods there, which is the headquarters of Juanita Foods in Wilmington. So just pleased to finally get this through and working in partnership with the family, the businesses, as well as the community. So thank you, colleagues, for your support on item 12 that we just approved. Thank you.
Great. Absolutely. Thank you for the comments. All right, so let's move to item number 1. Mr. Espinosa, would you read it into the record, please?
Item number 1 is a communication from the Council President relative to the appointment of Ms. Mindy Sarin to the Innovation and Performance Commission.
Great. Ms. Sarin, if you'd come forward to the podium. And I just want to start, thank you for your willingness to serve on the Innovation and Performance Commission. I've been impressed with your qualifications. You've got a lot to bring to the table. And just if you could let us know what sparked your interest in being on the IPC and what do you see for the future in that role?
Yeah, I have a great background in technology, from fixing computers to designing new concepts with IoT and microprocessors, and I've ran hackathons, and I just really like the whole concept of innovation. I've run courses on design thinking, so I'm just always looking for the next great idea to work with, whether it's just implementing something that already exists in a new way or creating something entirely new. So would love to be able to bring that to the city and help with more city projects.
Great. We look forward to your service on this and appreciate your willing to bring your expertise to us here at the city. Are there any further questions or comments? Mr. Buscaino.
Thanks, sir, and for your commitment to serving on the commission. I was just excited about your experience in the digital marketing space, so I'd like to hear from you. How do you plan on using your background in digital marketing to improve the commission?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of digital marketing with social media and analytics. It's all looking at how different digital aspects are being used, where bottlenecks are, and where they can be improved. And so sometimes you need to, you just look at numbers and you could see where bottlenecks are. At other times, it's talking with people and asking where are your pain points. And I could, listen to other people and see what they're feeling, and then go back and look at the numbers, go back and look at, say, a website or a certain technology, and bring everything together through there.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, no, the analytics are critical, and we're really big on metrics as we move forward on all of these different innovative ideas. One of the things that we look for is can we measure the success? Because if you can't measure it, it's really hard to improve upon it. So, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we will unanimously move forward your nomination to the full council, and we look forward to your service on the commission. Thank you very much, Ms. Aaron.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item number 2. We're going to take up items 2 and 3 together. We'll vote on them separately, but we're going to discuss them as one. They're related. So, Mr. Espinosa, would you read both items 2 and 3 into the record?
Item number 2 is the city administrative report relative to the amount of alley miles and estimate cost to repair the alleys within Council District 3. And item number 3 is a city administrative report relative to the feasibility of implementing a cost-sharing program for the repair of alleys.
Great. Thank you. Nicole Trujillo from the CAO's office will come to the podium along with John Sapone. Welcome. And we look forward to an overview on the cost-sharing solutions outlined in the report and whatever else you have to share. Thank you.
Nicole Trujillo, Office of the CAO. The city's alley network is approximately 1,026 lane miles, consisting of approximately 76 lane miles of unpaved alleys and 950 lane miles of paved alleys. Some of these paved alleys have reached or surpassed their useful lives and are prime candidates for repaving. The alleys may contain numerous cracks, potholes, buckled pavement, worn asphalt, uneven surfaces, making them difficult to navigate. Reconstructing an alley can cost between $300,000 and $530,000 per lane mile. The length, width, and condition of the alley determines the cost. Costs can increase if there are issues with drainage conditions, elevations, or impacts to adjacent properties that may require engineered plans. The availability of funding for alley improvements have been limited given that most special funding sources cannot be used for this purpose. Alleys are vehicular thoroughfares but not city streets, and most special funding sources can only be used for improving city streets. Therefore, only general funds have been traditionally used for alley repairs. There are three cost-sharing options discussed in this report. The first one is assessment districts. The second one is a cost-sharing program. The third is the heavy vehicle impact fee. And other options in the report include designating an alley as a street and removing an alley easement. And we're available for questions.
Good afternoon, John Sapone, Street Assembly. Nicole did a great job explaining basically kind of the nuts and bolts. For BSS's role, it would require us to actually do physical inspections, evaluate the alleys so we can kind of categorize, what kind of extent of work is involved. It would also be looking at ADA requirements, such as where the entryways of the alleys are, just in case there's more sidewalk involved, so there's a little more complex involved with that. And if and when, however the funding is determined, we would definitely apply it.
So I didn't find any mention of the alleys on the BSS website. If someone does call at this point in time and says they want their alley repaired, what kind of response would they get?
Well, it would be generated through 311, and then
say it again?
it would be generated through 311 request. Excuse me. And then the alleyway would be inspected and evaluated for a type of repair or mitigation.
But do they get a menu of choices of of how they could go about doing it? Or it goes as a request? Because we know that as a request, it's never going to get done because we don't have the money
There
for
are
it.
drop-downs. I know there are drop-downs exactly for the extent of required services. I'm not 100% positive.
Say that again. The acoustics in this room are
I'm sorry.
are really bad.
Yes, there are drop-downs to request services, as far as the extent, I think, also notes, but it's actually specific to exactly indicating a certain damage to the alley. I don't think that's there.
Okay. In terms of assessment districts, are there any examples of successful examples used for alleyways?
But we do have alleys repaired through discretionary funds as well as community gathering for funds at this point, but I'm not sure about assessment.
But there's never been an assessment district used for an alleyway.
Not,
Natalie Burrell, CA's office. Not that we know of, but I have been told by my municipal advisors that there are assessment engineers out there that would know how to assess this type of assessment district. But we really couldn't find one necessarily for alleys. We find them for other things, but not necessarily for alleys, for street improvements, landscaping improvements, things like that.
But there's nothing that would prevent us from doing it.
Well, there is some issue on the work that's being done. Is it work the city should be doing, or is it work that's in addition to what the city is doing? And because of Prop 218 and 26, there is going to be an opinion that's going to be issued by the city attorney on that. So it depends on the type of work that's going to be done. I can't give you a definite answer because I don't know the type of work that's going to be done.
Well, help me understand it. So if someone has just an alley that's in terrible shape, let's say, and they're a business, and there's several businesses in that area, and they all use that alley, and they want it to get fixed. City might fix it, but there's no money in the city budget for alleys. And they say, well, we'll assess ourselves like we do for the lighting that we have in front of our thing. We would want to agree to do that. How would we go about effectuating that?
I think we would need to have a list of what the repairs have to be done and have the attorneys and the assessment engineers advise us on how to do the assessment itself. Under Prop 218 and 26, there are rules on how you can assess that type of work. It's not necessarily square footage. It's also based on benefit to those property owners that butt up against what's being fixed. So it got really that's why we have not done any of this type of work since '98, because it's gotten very complicated under state law. But it's something we're willing to look into in more detail if we need to, look at the type of work that's being done, have the experts tell us if it can be done or not, and what kind of work to be done.
And is there this legal issue, which I'm trying to understand, where
I think
let's say it's not that complicated. It's just a road that needs to be repaved. Not a road, an alley that needs to be repaved. Something the city might ordinarily do. Does that prevent us from using an assessment district if the folks in that area voluntarily want to do it?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry, I don't. It's been such a long time, and there's been new rules and new state law. I can't answer that. I think that's a question for the attorneys, not for me.
Okay. Mr. Jordan, do you want to add?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we do assessment districts in the city. There's a division in our office that works directly on them and prepares the necessary ordinances that create those districts. If you like, we can engage those attorneys and work directly with the CAO to help answer some of those questions. As staff was indicating, there are a number of complex issues under state law, particularly dealing with the benefit, the general benefit, and the specific benefits that are arising out of those improvements. So
Maybe
it isn't something that I can answer right now, but we can certainly work with the office.
Maybe that can be one of the recommendations that comes out of this.
Yes.
Is to get a report back, or because it would be nice
Correct.
to make that an option for folks, not to jam it on anybody, because most people don't want to pay extra. But it may be in many circumstances something that folks do want to take advantage of. Just like there are other things like incorporating the alley into the property. How does that work? Is there a streamlined process if the businesses along the alley, or homeowners, but more likely businesses want to incorporate that in. Is that something that's been done or could be done fairly easily?
I think that'd be more of like a removal of an easement that would return the property or vacation of, and return the property to the property owner, and I think that's something that's done through the Bureau of Engineering. I don't think there's.
Adel Hashkhalil, General Manager of Streets LA. You know, I hear you, but I worked on assessments for a long time. I've done sewer assessment, street lighting assessment, sidewalk assessment. It's not an easy process, very complicated, and legally it becomes really complicated. And then you still have the vote of the people and who's willing to do that or not. I still think there's a alternative to that. What we're thinking about is if there is a business improvement district is willing to somehow collect money and somehow transfer money to us for us to take care of it and pave it, I think there's an easier process to do that than have an assessment process. So I want to just keep that door open. It's faster, quicker, and doesn't have to go through the legal issues. We can look into it. We're testing something similar right now as of a few days ago in the Studio City bid. There's some repairs that they wanted to do on some sidewalks in front of their businesses, and the bid had some money available, and they wanted to transfer the money so we can use it and help on overtime basis come in and repair those things. So I see that as another option that can make it faster.
If you have the bid.
If you have the bid.
Right. If you don't have the bid,
That's
Then you gotta
change.
look at
It makes it, but I still think the assessment process is feasible. Just it's a very complicated process. It's an option, but I still think one thing that we want to do is we're trying to figure out, in my view and my recommendation. This is me looking at it. I like the last two options. One is the assessment on heavy duty equipment that's really using the actual alley. The second is integrating the alleys into our street network, and that opens the door for us to use money and apply SDRF, the street damage restoration fee, on others. I think that's really the best way.
If we were to, I'll take the second one first, because I wanted to ask about both of those. If we incorporate it into our street network, does that not come with a whole host of other downsides? One, it lowers the overall PCI index for the city. It would then prioritize the streets, the alleys over the streets, because they would be in much worse shape, and then potentially slow down our ability to get our streets done. Would that not be an unintended consequence?
So with the PCI question, it would not, we would consider the alley, once we do it, we would actually raise it to 100, because the van are able to rate these streets. It was not be able to get in there. So ours would first be identifying the actual damage or needed repair, but when the street is done, we would bring it to 100%, so that we can start integrating
When it's done, but I'm saying if we just put the alleys, if we wholeheartedly accepted all the alleys into our street network, we would then have to take the same pot of money and spread it over a month.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying, Councilman. I think we can work it out. I think the first thing we need to do is open the door. Right now, I see alleys as orphans, basically not being taken care of. I think if you open the door to allow revenue to be used, but then as a policy, we can work on how we allocate the money to ensure that not the alleys are not completely taken over the improvements on the street, but at least have some continuous investment capped at certain level. I think we can have two PCIs, one for the alleys and one for the streets, not merge them together as we move forward. But at some point, they will come together. But I understand the concern. I think that could be a policy direction from your council to really how we spend the money, but open the door to allow us to use special funds to invest in alleys. It gives the council office discretion based on the importance to the council office where to spend the money. So if the priority is street A or 2 alleys or 3 alleys in this district, in your district, that could be an availability that we can use, especially that money can be used now if that policy decision is made. So I think it gives us a lot more flexibility and allows us, but we can sure work through this concern of having now all the resources going to alleys, and I think we can work it out and have separate PCIs and some caps on investment.
And then one other question, I'm going to turn to my colleagues for questions. You mentioned the street damage issue, or restoration fee, which would fall primarily on the waste haulers, because that's who uses those streets the most. And correct me if I'm wrong, but a garbage truck or a heavy truck is some ridiculously exponential impact than a regular car. I wanted to get that stat from you, but also could we use? I worry about putting another fee on that at the moment because we're having such issues with the waste hauling and the fees. But could we earmark some of the money that we are getting in the franchise fee appropriately to this?
That's a policy decision, and I think that's something that can be before you. You can actually address that. So instead of adding a fee on top of the cost, because eventually it'll come back to the users, you can actually decide to allocate money from the franchise fee to some kind of these repairs. So that's available.
But we need you to draw the nexus between the damage to those alleyways and those.
And I think if you can instruct us to come in and have that nexus, I think we can come in. There's data out there that talks about a heavy-duty truck, such as a trash truck, is equivalent to 10,000 cars going through that alley. So it's a large number. One of our system directors here did similar studies in Santa Ana and Redlands and to do that nexus. So I think instructions to really evaluate that and have that available, I think, is something we can do.
That's pretty amazing. 10,000 to 1 is pretty amazing. We got a lot of questions I want to turn over to colleagues. Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm very excited about this initial report, and I look forward to the report back. And Mr. Chair, I hope the report back will have a mixture of options, and we'll pursue every single one of these so we could see exactly what happens. But for the cost-sharing program, would it be like the sidewalk replacement program where if we did pursue that option, I know you're going to do a more in-depth analysis, but would we, once we'll share the costs in repaving the alleyway, then will we relinquish the responsibility to the adjacent property owners for the future maintenance and repair? Is that, no?
No, I mean, Nicole Trujillo, Office of CAO, it could be an option, but as far as the difference between the sidewalk repair program cost sharing and this cost sharing is that it would require all adjacent property owners to be to participate in order for the alley to be repaired, rather than a homeowner, it's just the sidewalk in front of their home. So there's a slight difference between the two.
So the cost-sharing program would be something like where we would help pay for some of the costs, but the future maintenance and repair would be all borne by the city then, because we still own it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's. You want to say something? Okay. To me, it's at the end of the day, it's. People look at us as the ones that have to maintain it and take care of it. So to me, it's. I think it's the best thing to do is that there's revenue, there's sources of money that's going to help us. Maybe the first start is this sharing to at least get the alley paved, but I think the long-term solution is to create a dedicated, sustainable source of funding for alleys to continue that maintenance and upkeep. I think that's the best solution. But a quick fix could be this first time where we can do this sharing. But I think the responsibility, people see us as responsible, and I think we should just deal with it that way and find a way how to sustainably fund it and take care of it.
Well, the problem is just funding right now, so, but I like your enthusiasm. For the option to vacate an alley, does the department have an estimate of how many alleys would fall into this category?
At this time, no, we'd have to evaluate that.
Okay. And if we did to pursue the vacating option, would the city need to fix, and you probably might not be able to answer this question, but will we need to fix the alley first before we turn over the easement or do a vacation to the property owner?
The concern I have about vacating an alley, that means you're returning the property back to the owners, adjacent owners. Alleys are used heavily for providing services to the residents and the businesses, such as trash services. My concern is if you completely turn it over to the private, it's basically, it's completely closed off, that we cannot be used to anybody to use it. It becomes private. And I think that's a concern, that it's going to take a lot of work to really analyze not only the future use, basically the use of the alley and how it's going to connect services and provide services. I think it's very complicated. And I'm not sure if we really need to restore it back to its condition, because really when you vacate something,
Right,
you're
okay.
vacating it to return it back to the owner. They can do whatever they want to do with it, and it could be just a garden, could be a front yard. And that's going to take, to me, my concern is how is the use? And that's going to complication that I think has to be looked at.
And and that's why I think there needs to be a mixture of options, because vacation through a sale or removal of an easement, it should be on the plate, because there are examples where there's an alleyway that's where it's like, especially in industrial or warehouse areas, where it's only one property owner that surrounds the entire alleyway, right? So, and I know there were vacations done before, because that one business or property owner was the only person using that alleyway anyways, and they wanted to be able to maintain and repair. So there could be some scenarios where this
case
could be,
by case basis,
yeah, case
yes.
by case. So I would want to make sure that option is still pursued. And there's another question you might not be able to answer at this point, but I'm very interested in it, is do you know how many alleyways are adjacent to city properties?
No, we'd have to research, sorry.
Well, hopefully when the report back comes back, it'll be more comprehensive with every option. Because I hear what you're saying, Adele, and I like the fact that whether we go with just the vehicle impact fee, heavy vehicle impact fee, but I think every other option should be explored.
Go ahead, Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over the years, whenever Streets LA does a resurfacing job in our neighborhood, and sometimes you do it on a grid, sometimes it's a little network of streets, they get resurfaced. It's always a head scratcher why sometimes the alleyways that will connect those streets are just left in a perpetual state of disrepair. We understand that comes from a special funding source. So I'm very favorable to the idea of bringing alleyways into our street networks. And for all practical purposes, it's a right-of-way that is, or for the most part, they're improved like a street is. So I want to ask a few questions about that. If we were to do that, I like that we would keep the grading systems separate. I think that's very important, because that would at least allow us to elevate the urgency of resurfacing some of the worst alleys, the ones that are in the worst shape. My question is, in this sort of assessment that you'll do in relation to this issue, will you also take a look at what are now paper streets, so-called paper streets that are sometimes in use as well? Would those be included or not, or something to think about? And then streets or alleys, not streets so much, but alleyways that in some cases have never been paved. They're mud, they're dirt, and they're used as well. Or if they have been paved, it's been decades and decades, and they look like they've never been paved. And I'm sure we still have some of those left. We certainly used to in the 13th District. And then lastly, with that, what would the standards be? We'd have to really take a close look at that, because I think in terms of unintended consequences, we wouldn't want to make the standards in keeping with most of our improved streets in terms of gutter installation, et cetera, because then you're talking about extreme costs. I don't want to assume that you're already thinking about all of those factors, but someone who was the Public Works Deputy for nearly 10 years for my predecessor, I really have a fairly good understanding of streets and alleys and curbs and gutters and sidewalks, et cetera. So those are the things that I think that you could shed some light on.
I'll give it a try. So as for paper streets, they wouldn't necessarily be included because they're not really a street, and there's many of them.
No, I said paper
street.
Yeah,
paper streets.
Okay, so that would be off the list.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as far as the actual evaluation of the alleys, to categorize based on the need for work, we do follow standard plans to repair the locations in question, such as alleys.
The
However-
acoustics are bad. Did you say false amortize? I didn't make out what you said.
I'm sorry. We follow the standard plans. I don't know, right on top
Oh,
of it.
follow the standard
Standard plans, yes.
Okay, all
And
right.
then that would ask us, or that would be as a guide to use when we're repairing the actual alley. As far as adding the curb and gutter, that would definitely be something that would come into play if, in fact, there's some type of engineered issues that will require that based on the alley condition of the properties to allow the water to flow. So that's all part of the actual assessment when we would inspect these alleys as part of the inspection process.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I think one thing, Councilman, is we need to think about, it's like a triage, right? I think you cannot go in and just completely reconstruct alleys. Right. It takes a lot of work, a lot of them require reconstruction, by the way, just seeing a lot of the alleys we have. But I think what we need to do is hopefully in the next few years, stabilize the condition, really make them passable, make them safe. We're looking at a couple of alleys right now that are completely unsafe and they're being used heavily. What we have done is actually just brought in recycled asphalt material from our grindings and placed them in these holes that are huge, and we're able to basically roll them. Doesn't cost much, but at least it just makes it stable for now. I think we need to start thinking about how we graduate the process to what I think needs to be done at some point is reconstruct the alleys based on the use, the weight of the equipment being put in it, and the proper drainage. My concern is drainage because I know if it's not properly done, it can have a potential impact on the properties adjacent. But I want to do, at least in the beginning, is have some way to stabilize the conditions and make them safe and passable. And that we're being creative. I know Keith and I have been looking at different options of different materials, but just as simple as getting a recycled asphalt grindings and having it placed in the holes and just completely, rolling it could be a way. So I think what you're going through is exactly what we're thinking, and I think it has to be a gradual process.
Thank you. And for alleys that need some re-engineering or engineering, then perhaps that's where the cost share component could come in, possibly, for business, especially merchant areas for the most part. There could be a cost sharing.
Especially if it's a major use by the business. They have 18-wheelers and others coming through, and they want to have something that is really withstands the use. I think we can work with them on having it done that way.
And lastly, Mr. Chair, the specific pots of state money that are allocated for only resurfacing alleyways, we wouldn't want to sacrifice that either, right? Because those monies are still going to be available. So if we recategorize all alleys as streets, then how would we deal with that?
We'll have to think about it, but I think we still can call them alleys. Alleys are still alleys.
It's just
but
however
for city policy here, I think by action by the policymakers and the mayor to really bring them into the mix of they're part of the street network. They're not street, they're part of the street network, can open the door to allowing us to access funding that it gives you a flexibility as the policymakers to allocate money as you see fit, and it's available for us to use. I think that gives us a little more flexibility, gives you more flexibility to work with us on how we invest those dollars into the right way.
All right, we wouldn't get dinged for that, for recategorizing. Okay, thank you.
Great. Mr. Buscano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the informational report. I had a quick question on the recategorizing alleys as streets. Are any other cities, have any other cities made this change? Do we know? Not that you know of?
Nicole Trujillo, Office of CAO, not that I know of. I could look into that if you like.
And maybe a question for Natalie. Natalie, our days together with Save Our Streets LA, those phone calls, remember those Monday morning phone calls with Mitch Englander and the entire team? Every time we were thinking about ways to find the funding sources to save our streets, alleys always came up. So I know this report before us is for information only. However, there's no opinion on which funding options would be the most feasible, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are based on the report before us. Has it been discussed whether or not some of these options are better suited for one part of the city compared to the other, another part of the city? I do know, alleys touch every corner. What are your thoughts?
For the assessment, I think we would need to look at the list of what needs to be done. I think that's where the assessment engineers and the attorneys need to get together and determine what work has to be done that can be applied to the assessment district, right? Because like I said before, 218 and 26 changed a lot of what we can and can't do in assessment districts. And without knowing exactly what the work being done, we did have our municipal advisor speak to several assessment engineers. It was hard to say that every single alley could be done. And I think the city attorney's advice is a good one, that we instruct us to go back, let our municipal advisors do a little bit more homework for us, meet with some assessment engineers. We could go out for a mini RFP and get, one to look at it for us, and work with the city attorney's office and our bond attorneys to see what can and can't be done. Because it is a little stricter now than it was before. So that's the only caveat I have. I mean, everything else is really up to the department on how they think it can best be done. And this is a long process. We outlined a very long process for you on the assessment district, right? Over a year to get an assessment district done because of these rules and the way that the state wants us to handle, additional taxes on, homeowners. I mean, that's the bottom line. This is an exception to, Prop 13, this is Prop 218, Prop 26. So I think with that instruction, we can maybe go and work with the attorneys and see what can and can't be done, and that'll give you a better idea of how you want the department to do it. But again, you're going to have to go through a vote, right? You have to get the 2/3 vote to get the property owners surrounding that alley to agree to the assessment.
Got it.
How difficult that is, I don't know that, right? So that's the only caveat with the assessment district.
And back
too.
to funding sources, SB1, Measure M, can we tap into any of those sources of funds?
I don't know the answer to that.
Nicole Trujillo, Office of CEO. If we designate these alleys into a street, then there's a
Then we can,
possibility
right?
we can, yes.
Right,
But
right,
as it stands now, we cannot.
Right, okay.
And the other caveat I have is that if there's city property involved, right, in any of these assessment districts, or if there's property owned by a government agency and they don't want to pay for it, we have to pick up that cost. So there could be a cost to us, right? So let's say there's an alleyway that has 5 property owners plus, let's say, a school, and LAUSD's like, we're not going to pay for that. If you want to do this, the city would have to pick up that 1/6 of whatever, however the assessment engineer decides that assessment should be done, the city would have to pick that up.
Got it. I understand the heavy vehicle impact fee is one of the options. I believe we are our own culprits because our own sanitation trucks are tearing up our alleys. So we're going to, I know it's an option, but we're going to be charging ourselves for tearing up our own alleys. But nonetheless, our alleys, I also, Mr. Chair, I'd like to even take it a step further in this report. I know once our alleys are in good condition, the question we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing to maintain and beautifying our alleys around the city? And to take it even further about even greening our alleyways for beautification, I'd just like to ask the city that if the city does decide to move forward with one of these options, we ensure at a minimum funding for regular cleanups of alleys is also included. My Watts constituency director, for the purpose of this report before me, sent me photos of alleyways in the Watts community that need some love, that are clearly tore up. So with ongoing trash and beautification efforts continue to be made through our local nonprofits and in partnership with street services. So just wanted to throw that out there as we move forward in this report.
It's actually a good point on the converting some of these alleys to actually green alleys that can capture stormwater. That relationship, I think, can open the door for some other funding on the water side. So I think we should put that on the table and identify alternative for stormwater capture and infiltration as part of alleys, if that's possible.
Thanks, Adele.
Colleagues, any other comments or questions on these items? Okay, then. So with item 2, without objection, we'll note and file information only. And then item 3, we will also note and file, but I want to add some recommendations, some instructions. One is to request the Bureau of Engineering to report on the process necessary to vacate an entire alley, and if there could be a cost savings associated with assessing multiple properties at once. 2 is to direct Streets LA to create a menu of options, including the choices of an assessment district and a cost-sharing program on the website in terms of, so that people know what those options are. 3 is direct Streets LA to work with LA Sanitation to determine what portion of revenues from Recycle LA could appropriately be used for alleyway repair. 4 is the directing Streets LA to create options to let us know what the options are for bringing alleys into the street network without and maintaining our discretion so that we can prioritize. I'm not framing this well, but make sure we can continue our priority on our streets. In other words, we're not looking for the option of just dump everything into the street network and then everything competes with everything, but what you were talking about with different PCIs and those kinds of things. 5, a report back from the city attorney on how the city could use the creation of an assessment district for alleyway repair, which we were talking about. Okay, and then, colleagues, did I miss anything? I tried to cover what you guys raised as well.
Yeah, in addition to the assessment district, I don't know if your first recommendation included this all, but can we ask the department to look at all the different options that they explored, the cost-sharing program, as well as the heavy vehicle impact fee, and the vacation, sale or vacation?
Sure.
Yeah.
We can look at that, but I wanted to make it clear with the bringing them back into the street network that the options we want to look at are the ones that maintain our discretion,
right?
Not just putting it directly back into the network.
And Mr. Chair, I would just add, just dial down on street standards that are specific to alleyways and how those are different than traditional paved streets. Thank you.
Okay, without objection.
Can we, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if I can, add the ongoing maintenance and beautification and lighting and all that?
Frame it in a, what do you mean?
So I'd like to amend to include that appropriate ongoing maintenance for the funding of maintaining alleys, such as lighting, beautification and greening, as greening of alleyways as well.
What the options are for,
right,
not just for the repaving,
not
but
only
for
the repaving, but also the ongoing maintenance.
The ongoing maintenance. Okay. Great. Without objection, so ordered, and we can move on to item number 4. Mr. Espinosa, would you read that into the record, please?
Item number 4 is the City Administrative Officer and Chief Legislative Analyst Joint Report relative to the status of the city's network of concrete streets.
Oh, and before you start, we have a couple public comments. I wanted to take those up first. Cindy Chavatal, followed by Nathan Forrest.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Cindy Chavatal-Keene, and I'm here on behalf of the Hancock Park neighborhood. And I'm here to thank our councilman, Councilman Rue, and to thank the new director of Streets LA and their teams and the crews. In the last month alone, we have had several street segments, uneven pavement, sunken pavement. We have all concrete streets in Hancock Park, which is a historic district. And for years, we've been trying to get a plan together to have those streets fixed. And that's now all moving forward, and the neighborhood is delighted. And I'm here to thank all of you on behalf of the neighborhood. And we look forward to a great partnership going forward with our councilman and with the director and his team. In the last month, they fixed numerous segments, and we could not be happier. So thank you.
We've got a great council member. All right, and next, Mr. Nathan Forrest.
Hi, Nathan Forrest, a pavement engineer with the California Nevada Cement Association. We transmitted a letter for the council file, and I just wanted to make a couple references to some of the items in the letter for you today. First, we want to thank and applaud the committee and the city for continuing to investigate solutions to the concrete streets that are in poor condition. We've been following this process for some time in Cindy's neighborhood and in Councilmember Yu's district, and happy with what we saw in the CAO CLA report, but have a couple of recommendations for that. Encourage the city to continue to explore the environmental benefits that can come with the concrete pavement, including those of reduced maintenance, reduced vehicle emissions driving on those pavements, and reduction in urban heat island effects as a result of having light surfaces for your paving materials. There's been a lack of funding for a dedicated concrete street repair and rehabilitation system within the city. Within this letter, we've identified 8 potential sources of funding that may be able to be used to rectify some of those situations.
Finish your thought. The time expired, but just finish your thought. Go ahead.
Apologies. 2 other things. We encourage the city to explore the potential for diamond grinding to rehabilitate these concrete pavements. It's a process widely used by Caltrans and other agencies. It's very low cost, much lower cost than any asphalt overlays that were identified in the report. And additionally, we at the association continue to serve as a resource to the city. We're happy to bring in our expertise, our national experts, to help the city solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, Ms. Trujillo, Ms. Cantagna, welcome. You guys can provide an overview of the report on concrete streets.
Nicole Trujillo, Office of the CAO. The council instructed the CAO's office and the CLA's office with the assistance of the Bureau of Engineering, Bureau of Street Services, and the Bureau of Contract Administration to report on an analysis on how the city can address the backlog of D and F concrete street repairs, a comparison on the cost and longevity of similar asphalt street reconstruction projects, and a cost comparison analysis of 2 concrete street repair pilot projects completed on 4th Street from Highland Avenue to McAdam Place by the Bureau of Street Services crews, and McAdam Place between 2nd and 3rd Street performed by a contractor managed by the Bureau of Engineering, and an analysis of full cost, direct and indirect, of the use of the outside contractors and or city crews for concrete repair work. The city's concrete street network is approximately 1,184 lane miles, of which 965 lane miles, or 82%, are in poor condition. The city has an additional 1,893 lane miles of concrete streets which have been rehabilitated with an asphalt overlay. The city's asphalt street network, including streets which have been rehabilitated with an asphalt overlay, is approximately 21,790 lane miles, of which 4,533 lane miles, or 21%, are in poor condition. A new PCI assessment of the city's concrete streets will be completed by June 2019 and will be followed by field assessments to determine the level of work required on each inspected street. The Bureau of Street Services proposes, and our offices concur, that during this assessment, the city's concrete streets should be divided into one of 3 categories. The first category would be streets eligible for asphalt overlay, which involves the removal of 1.5 inches of concrete from the roadway surface, followed by an application of an asphalt overlay. The second category would be small-scale repairs, which would require removal or repair of individual concrete panels ranging from 10 feet by 12 feet to 20 feet by 12 feet. And the third category would be large-scale repairs and or reconstruction, defined as streets requiring the replacement of an entire street segment, curb face to curb face, and or repairs and or reconstruction which requires engineering and design work.
Our offices were also instructed to compare the cost and longevity of concrete and asphalt repairs and reconstruction. To do so, we analyzed 2 pilot projects, both completed in Council District 4. The first occurred on 4th Street from Highland Avenue to McAdam Place, and that utilized a standard design plan and construction was completed by the Bureau of Street Services. The project consisted of 0.19 lane miles of concrete street repair in addition to curb and driveway work. The second project occurred on McAdam Place between 2nd and 3rd Streets, and that required design work which was performed by the Bureau of Engineering's Street Improvement and Stormwater Division, and the design work allowed for improved drainage on the street. That construction was performed by a contractor managed by the Bureau of Engineering, and that project included 0.4 lane miles of concrete repair work in addition to curb work. Our analysis showed that the cost of construction using Bureau of Street Services crews was lower than the cost of construction utilizing Bureau of Engineering contractor. The costs were $13.76 per square foot, 76 cents per square foot, compared to $17.44 per square foot. Although Bureau of Street Services per square foot costs were lower, we determined that these projects do not provide an adequate data set for evaluating the potential range of work that would be required on the city's concrete streets. While the scope of necessary work will vary from street to street, design engineering work will be required for the most complex repair and reconstruction projects. And in these situations, design and engineering work will be necessary regardless of whether the work is performed by city forces or a contractor. And that may result in higher overall project costs to implement the necessary design and engineering work. Our office has concluded that currently we do not have sufficient data to assess the cost effectiveness of dedicating resources to repair and or reconstruct streets in concrete versus asphalt. To perform this assessment, our offices require additional information regarding the scope and the nature of work required on individual streets in the city's concrete network, along with the useful life and maintenance costs associated with concrete versus asphalt on those streets. The results of this analysis may vary based on the characteristics of and work required on individual streets. So as the Bureau of Street Services completes the field assessments that Nicole mentioned, our offices will work with the Bureau to develop an incremental approach to determining the most effective way to address the city's concrete streets. We're available for questions.
Thank you very much. You know, this question of what the long-term costs are of concrete versus asphalt, I hear what you're saying, which is it all depends. And it's interesting because to know what those factors are, and I don't know if maybe there's a way to do a report where you could kind of show us the scope of what those variables are, and so that we'd have a better sense instead of having, and I know every street's going to be a little different, but you could give maybe a couple of case examples of when it would be more cost effective for concrete, when it would be more cost effective for asphalt, and we could kind of see the curve of what the variabilities are, so that we would know how to address that in the future. And I guess that'll be one of my recommendations today will be to ask for that kind of a report. Also, I understand there's a slurry seal that works in lighter colors, and that can be used on concrete, or if you could explain, and I know we've been back and forth on this a couple of times, but it's really exciting, the idea of a concrete slurry, because that could also create a whole new set of options for us. Is that a viable thing?
Currently, what it is, it's in our testing phase. It is actually a cool slurry seal that has a polymer of a concrete element, but it technically right now cannot be used on concrete first. What we would do is we would actually do an overlay, and then this could be treated on top.
So at the moment, it's just can only be done on an overlay, but maybe in the future, that would be a potential concrete option.
It quite possibly, yes.
Yeah, but I mean, realistic future, not like, science fiction future.
So,
yeah.
It could be a little bit of both, Councilman. Keith Mose, Assistant Director, Streets LA. So we're in the testing phase of this cool slurry product, and basically it serves two purposes. It's a white pigmented polymer slurry that gives a cooling effect with the albedo, and it also serves to preserve the street network as far as the PCI itself, as far as sealing cracks a traditional way. So we have been working with the vendor and to basically test different products that we can apply directly over concrete. And we are in the testing phase and experimental phases. I can't give you a timeline right now of how long that would take before we'd be able to do it. But as John mentioned, we can actually cut a concrete street and basically put asphalt over it and then come back with this cool slurry application. Right now it looks like concrete, feels like concrete. It's a very firm surface, but at the same time it will, as I said, do that cooling effect, but also preserve as far as encapsulate the asphalt on top of it. And so it basically looks very similar to concrete at this point.
Great, thank you. And last question, then I'm going to turn to Mr. Roux, because this is really his big focus here. Has the city ever had a dedicated a crew to maintaining concrete streets? And if so, when was the last time there was such a crew?
So that would go back decades to where we had like small concrete crews that actually mostly did off-grade gutter repairs. And basically, once streets were installed, we didn't have, we didn't set aside money for maintenance, so to speak, to basically do a full concrete replacement. So we haven't had concrete crews that had the capacity to do panel replacements or full paving of concrete streets for quite a while.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ryu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Bloomfield. I want to thank Cindy Shavato from the Hancock Park Homeowners Association for coming out here today. But I also want to thank the Bureau of Street Services, the CAO, the CLA for producing this report. It's very thoughtful and very useful, especially in the city's efforts to fix and maintain all of our streets, asphalt and concrete. So big kudos to Adele for thinking outside the box. The discussion around repairing our concrete streets is important not only to Council District 4, but to the city as a whole. The condition of these streets, many which have not been repaired in almost a century, represents a number of safety, liability, and quality of life concerns for the city and its residents. The condition of these streets have been proven especially difficult in my district, but this is a citywide problem. Our city has about 1,184 lane miles of concrete streets in every council district of our city, but not only have they been ignored for decades, but 82% of them are failed streets graded Ds and Fs. I understand that the cost of concrete is what kept this issue in the back burner, but it is essential that we dig into the effectiveness and longevity that concrete brings and weigh both of its costs and benefits. Fixing our concrete streets has been a priority for me since I took office, and I made it a priority in budget deliberations. With that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move the report's recommendation along, but I do have a few questions. And the first question is, will the report back from the CAO and BSS include concrete streets that were previously considered withdrawn but now are included in the city streets?
Short answer, yes.
Great. And in the report, you indicate that BSS can increase its annual asphalt overlay work from between 6 to 12 miles annually. Now, is that 6 to 12 miles total, or is it 6 to 12 miles on top of the 5.73 average lane miles that we already do for asphalt overlays?
That will be on top of. And so basically we total approximately 20 lane miles. The reason why we have to limit the amount of lane miles is because concrete is a rigid pavement, and it's very, as far as you have metal on concrete, and basically it does a lot of damage to our equipment, so we cannot, say, do 200 lane miles of concrete overlays. We have to limit the number of miles that we do.
Okay, so you'll basically double or triple.
Correct.
The overlay, the asphalt overlay program.
Yeah.
And again, as we've spoken before, you guys educated me where concrete is a great base for asphalt overlays, right?
That is correct.
So it turns out that's great. Another question is, for this fiscal year, we do have 2 months left, but your report states that we're just short about half done for this year's asphalt overlay. Are we going to meet that?
Yes, sir. So right now we've completed, as of today, 4.62 lane miles of concrete overlays.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yes.
Wow, since this report, that's good. So the secondary question is, so when we do add the additional 6 to 12 lane miles, you guys will still be able to?
Yes, we'll be able to absorb that.
Okay, great. Recycled materials. I'm very interested in the cool pavement for concrete. But in your report, you also stated that recycled asphalt pavement can be used for other construction or resurfacing projects. And can you elaborate on the environmental impacts of manufacturing of concrete, and if the recycled concrete could reduce those impacts?
So right now we actually recycle concrete. We have a RoboMaster 1000 concrete crusher, and basically we have it at a facility where we take from our sidewalk program concrete panels, we actually crush it. We use that material for a base material for our sidewalk program, and it can be used for a base material for streets as well. We've had, we could work with, say, different vendors to look at different recycling products for concrete. It's not necessarily a green product when you produce concrete, but if you use recycled concrete, like, say, porcelain or different type of fly ash, different things like that, you can increase your recycling content in concrete.
Great. And I know especially when we have someone from the Cement Association here, there's a lot more technologies on concrete. And, you know, as one of the speakers, as a person from the Cement Association did mention, I know LA County is using the diamond grinding technique. Have we looked at that, the feasibility of that?
Yes, we have. We've looked at that, and all it is this blade, so to speak, and they basically smooth out as far as uneven surfaces on concrete. You'll see that, say, on the Caltrans freeway, for instance. You can see these little groove lines. So that's something we can explore as an option, at least to relieve uplifts, things like that, to actually smooth out the street.
If we could, Mr. Chair, if we could include that in the, add that on as a recommendation to look into that. But I do know the equipment's pretty expensive, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we could look into that. You know, once BSS, last question, once BSS has completed site visits, will the department be providing a priority ranking of all concrete streets with the ranking factors, factors including PCI, level and type of usage, ease or difficulty of repair, and so forth?
Yes, and so basically it'll be similar to what we do as far as our regular asphalt pavements. We'll assign a PCI to it. We'll look at if these have liability payouts, different things like that. Drainage issue requires engineering reports, and we'll look at whether these can be replaced, say just a panel being replaced, whether we can overlay it or it requires full reconstruction. And we'd work with the, say, community, different council offices to basically come up with that list.
Great, and obviously that just makes perfect logical sense to come up with a citywide priority list, so I look forward to that. And especially since this is a citywide problem. And one last question I remembered. For hillsides, for concrete streets in the hillsides, and I know when you finish the upcoming report, you'll be able to more talk about the engineering, but can hillside concrete streets also be small-scale repairs, panelized, or because of the incline, does it require engineering?
So those can be, depending on the severity, panels can be replaced on those types of streets. Where the difficulty comes for us is putting our, say, profiler on there. If it gets more than, let's say, a 10% or 14% incline, then basically it makes it a challenge for us. We can't safely necessarily cut that street because our equipment can slide down the hill. But it is possible to overlay them, and it is possible to do panel repairs on that. So back in the day, I had to say those were all done typically by hand, you know.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, we could increase our workforce. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And again, I really commend you guys. This has been a long struggle. It took a lot longer than I expected, but in 3.5 years, we came up with very innovative solutions. And as you could tell from some of the constituents, we've seen some results already, but we hope to see this citywide because we do have a lot of concrete streets. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rue. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, sir. A couple of quick ones. So if you want to see a steep concrete street, go to Fargo and Baxter in Echo Park. It's probably the steepest in the city.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. But we mitigated it working with DOT, so we're good on Baxter. We have other issues now. But thank you, Waze. So I love that you included your Glassell Park job here in your cool pavement photos. So, gentlemen, is this cool pavement, is this a mixture of cement, and is it an amalgam of other materials?
It's a cement-based with polymers added to it, and so it's I'm not sure the exact mixture, but it's basically cement, rock sand, and polymers.
Mm-hmm. And last time, I think Adele might have just discussed this with you casually, like walking down a hallway, but you're getting the cost down for this cool pavement application. Might have been you, Keith. I'm not, but
doesn't matter. Yes, we're working with the vendor now as far as on the cost of this product.
How much has it come down since we did our first demonstration project some recent years ago?
Our first demonstration project?
Well, we've done cool pavement before, but maybe not with this exact mixture. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's two different products altogether.
Is this new product more cost effective? That's the question.
So the new product is not yet commercially available, so it doesn't have a cost yet. It's in development.
All right.
The product that we've used to date is Guard Top Cool Seal, and that costs about 60 cents per square foot installed.
As opposed to the typical Slurry Seal, which is pennies.
Approximately $2.50, 60 cents, approximately.
Wait, so 60 cents a square foot for the cool pavement, and what's the $2.50?
For the cool
Oh,
slurry.
for this, it's $2.50. Okay, so
approximately.
Approximately. So hopefully the manufacturer will work with the city and we can do more of these demonstrations.
The key thing that we're looking at, Councilman, is with this new material we're looking at, what we've been looking for is a material that can do two things: street preservation and cooling at the same time. Instead of doing sealing and slurry that's black and then have the cooling separately. If we get to a point where we have both, that's when we can get the biggest bang for the buck and we can get really the maximum benefit. That's what we're searching for. That's what we're working on. Right now, we're still in a pilot stage, and we're hoping at some point we'll be able to sit down and start negotiating, and hopefully competition will start seeing this, and we'll have new materials now developed because, LA is leading the country, and what LA does, everybody else follows. So we're proud to be leaders in this.
And this cool pavement mix that you have here that you applied near Marguerite and Glassell Park can be applied to existing asphalt and existing concrete.
Right now, existing asphalt, right now.
But not concrete.
Not at the moment.
At the moment, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Farrell. So I think we'll make the recommendations, we'll adopt the recommendations in the February 15, 2019 Joint CAO-CLA report with an additional recommendation to instruct the CAO to conduct a comparative cost analysis between concrete and asphalt streets to determine which is the most cost-effective over the life cycle of each type of street. We'll report back on the feasibility and the cost of diamond grinding as per Mr. Rue's request. And I think that covers it with all the other requests. And without objection, that'll be the order. Thank you so much. And that takes us to item number 5. Mr. Espinosa, if you'd read that, be so kind as to read that into the record.
Item number 5 is a report from the Bureau of Street Services, a joint report from Street Services as well as Los Angeles Department of Transportation relative to efforts to inspect the existing bicycle network, and this was also referred to the Transportation Committee.
Great. Thank you, and welcome. We have our folks from Street Services and DOT to report on the item. So, Greg, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Greg Spott, Streets LA, and I'm joined by my friend Carlos Rios from LA DOT. We've had some great collaboration working on this analysis, and I'm happy to be here with you. I thought maybe we could start with a few pictures just to visualize what the problem is. The problem we're focused on in this report is on-street bike lanes where the riding surface has major distress. We're not talking about a little pothole, a little divot where a pothole truck can come and make a small asphalt repair. We are now proactively and continuously inspecting the bike lane network and doing small asphalt repairs and motor sweeping as needed. And that's something new as of 2 years ago, and that's made a tremendous positive change in the rideability and safety of the on-street bike lane network. But what those folks can't do is mill out and repave a section like what you're seeing here. This is an asphalt bike lane with alligator cracking, and there's no way you could add more asphalt on there and make it smooth. These cracks would just reflect through whatever you added on there. This has to be milled out and put back with new asphalt, and this is the kind of situation we're talking about in this report. And the next slide is similar, but a concrete street. Concrete streets being the theme today. And as you can see, many of our concrete streets are near the end of their service life. They've had extensive utility trenching. In this example, a whole lot of trenching has occurred, and often the fill hasn't compacted enough, and so that trench starts to subside a little bit. And bikes are very sensitive to even small changes in height. And so these dips and these seams and edges and cracks can be dangerous. And so these are the situations that we're talking to you about today. In the summer of 2017, Streets LA supervisors did the first ever inspection of the entire on-street bike lane network. And that inspection was done, we call it a windshield survey, meaning driving them. And we were looking for major distresses like the ones in the slides I just showed you. And after that assessment, we were able to obtain $765,000 in one-time funding. And we used that to do some major repairs. how many lane miles does it say here? Is it 15? 15 lane miles of bike lanes were milled out and repaved, which is a lot of nice smooth riding for the public. A year later, when this motion was made, we got together with DOT and we developed a more rigorous statistical methodology, and we did a second survey where we actually rated each segment, every city block, good, fair, or poor. And this was the first time we actually had some kind of statistics on the quality of the road surface of the on-street bike lane network. So in Table 2, there are 45% of the on-street bike lane network has road surface in good condition. 35% has road surface in fair condition. 16% of the bike lane network is asphalt in poor condition, like the picture I just showed you. And 4% of the bike lane network is concrete in poor condition. So a total of 20% of the bike lane network is in poor condition. And we set out to try to come up with a ballpark cost estimate for how much it would cost to make those repairs. This is not a site-specific estimate, making an estimate for each project, but coming up with some average costs. And in Table 3, to repair, to mill out and repave 148 lane miles of asphalt bike lanes in poor condition would cost something between $13 and $18 million, plus $1.4 million in restriping. If we were going to do the same thing for the fair condition asphalt segments, which are not as bad, that would be another $39 to $54 million with $4.4 additional million in striping. And then we come to the concrete segments, and this is highly costly. It's only 4% of the network, but it's very, very costly. There could be $40 million in costs there. And the scope is just something, as you saw in the recent earlier reports in this meeting, it's just at a scale that we've never done before. Even just this one project, Griffith Park Boulevard in CD4 and CD13, that could even be an 8-figure project to, actually tear out the concrete street and replace it with new. It's not something that's been done at scale in the city.
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely, Mr. O'Farrell, go ahead.
Just real quick, so when you talk about replacing the bike lane only, are you talking about replacing the entire street, for clarification?
So the prices we've estimated here are replacing the bike lane only.
Because wouldn't it make more sense when it's time to replace the street? I know we have a bike lane issue in terms of the conditions, but is it more or less the whole street need to be resurfaced as well? Because isn't it just so much more expensive just to carve out and replace a bike lane in an existing adjacent street when you can improve the whole street and then restripe the whole thing, bike lanes and all?
Well, it really depends on the condition of the entire street. We have streets where there's been buses that have beat up the curb lane, and that's where the bike lane is, and the middle lanes are not so bad. And in that case, milling out and repaving just the bike lanes is more cost-effective than tearing out the whole thing. These concrete streets are very difficult because we did one block. We did a fix where there had been a major claim on Griffith Park Boulevard. And I remember being out there with our crews and supervisors, and we decided to do it curb to curb because the whole thing was in bad condition. And we thought if we mobilized here and just fixed part of it, we really weren't even sure we were removing the liability risk at that point if we touched it and we didn't make it right. And so the concrete bike lane situation is particularly complex because in many cases, curb to curb, it's at the end of its service life. And there might even be, new liability issues if we just repoured some of it and left some of it outside the bike lane that was in poor condition. So I don't really have too much more to add. Is there anything you'd like to add from DOT's perspective?
No, I just wanted to thank Greg and his team for the amount of work that's gone into this report and the assessment, because it was a pretty Herculean effort to actually do a segment-by-segment analysis of the bike network. So I just wanted to echo and thank Greg and his team, and we're here at DOT to fully support the recommendations in this report to identify the resources, the funding to be able to, address this issue.
A couple of questions. So how often does BSS inspect the on-street bike facilities network?
So when the Complete Streets program was launched, we were able to include in that council file 6 bike lane specific positions at Streets LA. And that means in the metro there's 3 people, and in the valley there's 3 people. There's a supervisor, a motor sweeper operator, and a truck operator who hauls away the debris. And so those teams are working continuously, inspecting, calling in potholes which are fixed in the regular pothole program, and doing motor sweepings as needed. And so that's a different type of inspection than this comprehensive inspection that we did here, where we had every one of our supervisors in each of the 24 maintenance districts inspect the bike lanes in their maintenance district. So this was a sort of a statistical macro one, whereas we do have continuous inspections going on to identify the work that we're already funded to do now in these cleanings and these small asphalt repairs. And I just want to mention that sometimes these cleanings really help the neighborhood. Sometimes it's an arterial that doesn't have posted sweeping, and there's no posted no parking, and there are cars that have been parked there for 6 months. And so you do a special no parking, and people move those vehicles. There are times when we remove dozens of cubic yards of material from just a couple blocks. And so the bike lane cleaning program has actually become a real neighborhood favorite, even for people who aren't riding their bike.
Yeah, that's clearly we need it, and this is a good way to help with the dual effect there. I want to talk about the rough road signs. One of the ideas was to put in some more rough road signs, which is a good thing, although I get a little uneasy about it, because I know we will get subjected to the criticism of, well, why are you spending money warning us about how terrible everything is instead of just fixing it? And I get that, but I also get the idea that this can potentially remove some liability, and if we don't have something fixed, then we ought to be able to warn people about it. So tell me a little bit about that, and also the rough road signs that are currently installed on Griffith Park Boulevard, south of Los Feliz Boulevard. How have those signs been received, and how is that working?
Well, to answer your first question, understanding the magnitude of the work involved to bring these streets to a state of good repair, we know it's going to be a timely process, so that's why DOT recommended to be proactive and start identifying some of these streets, prioritizing some of the streets that could benefit from just an advanced message sign that's just basically serving as an alert to the users, the bikers, just to exercise more caution when they're on these streets. I don't have any actual data to report back on how the rough pavement signs have gone on Griffith Park, but I can definitely report back on that. Again, the idea for us is just if we can take a proactive approach, because we know that even if the funding were to come through, it's going to be some time before we actually get to some of those streets. So the recommendation here is for DOT to go out there and develop a plan and identify the streets in most need that can benefit from these advanced warning signs.
And give me a sense of scope. If we were to proceed with the installation of these signs, how many signs are we talking about?
Well, we're probably looking at, if you look at the table 2 that identifies the block segments that are in fair or poor condition, we're talking in the neighborhood of close to 3,000 block segments that are in fair or poor, or plus the PCCs under 200. So we're looking roughly at about 2,200 street segments. We're probably thinking about putting up one sign on each end of the street as the bikers and the drivers are driving down the street. So it could be a pretty big task.
4,400. I mean, because there's also the problem, the Prop 65 problem, I call it, where you have a sign up so often. That's the one that warns you about some element of cancer, and you see it everywhere. You see it when you walk into Starbucks, and it's so ubiquitous that it's ignored. And that's a problem too. If we put these signs up on every street that's fair or poor, it almost becomes meaningless.
Yeah, and that's why the instruction in this report is basically to allow DOT to go out there and make an assessment and come back with a plan on which streets we feel would be in most benefit the most from these types of signs. We understand the sign clutter and, sometimes if you put too much signs out there, it gets people just ignore them. But the idea here is for us to go out there and assess exactly which streets are in the biggest need of these signs.
And is there a way to link the sign to some calendar of action? Because the other thing I fear is that we put a sign up now, or a bunch of signs, and 5, 10 years from now, people will say, yeah, there's been a rough road sign there for 10 years. I wish they would have just fixed it, kind of thing. Whereas and then the other potential downside is if you put the sign up, then the number of 311 calls coming in for that segment are going to go down dramatically because people will say, well, the city knows about it, I don't have to tell them. And then we might get lulled into a false sense of security about that segment not being one of the worst ones because it's not going to be complained about as much.
Yeah, the idea behind this recommendation is not as a fix-it problem. It's kind of an interim solution to at least alert as we develop a plan to make these corrections. It's not meant to be in there in perpetuity. The idea is to somehow work together to address this issue that we need to address.
And I know the budget hasn't come out yet, but did BSS and LADOT request resources necessary for both the sign program and for the heavy asphalt repair?
We had made a specific request in the previous budget cycle for large asphalt repairs specific to bike lanes. In this budget cycle, we have a request for liability risk location large asphalt repairs to include bike lanes and many other types of risks that are out there. So we've requested 4 crews that could do this work and lots of other kinds of parallel similar work that is not an unmarked bike lane.
Okay, great. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have a concern. I don't know how we square using tax money to put up signs saying rough road with actually spending tax money to fix the rough roads. I think that could be a bit of a, not sure about the liability as far as if that helps us liability-wise. And I have a feeling it could be not well received out there, just a sense. I think it could be mocked openly, and it'd be hard to defend that. And we're talking potentially hundreds, maybe even into the thousands of signs.
He was saying almost 5,000 signs.
That's a lot of expense just to warn people of a rough road. And what about if you're going to go down that path? What about pavement paint saying rough road, proceed with caution instead of posted signs?
Great question.
Decals.
Again,
or decals. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the pavement signs, I can't really speak on behalf of that. I don't know if you want to chime in on the pavement. But again, the signs weren't meant to be the fix-all.
Yeah, and I get that. And I get it's just an idea, and it's nothing's etched in stone here. But I don't know, my spidey senses are telling me this would be very poorly received from people who just want our roads fixed.
Yeah, good afternoon, council members. Dan Mitchell with LADOT, Assistant General Manager. So we certainly share your concern, and our spidey sense is going off too. Yeah. At the same time, we have such a sense of urgency with this problem. The numbers here have shown that a significant part of our bike network is in poor condition, and we have to do something. So this option was meant to go hand in hand with a commitment to actually dedicate resources to repairing the bike network. I think if the two things go hand in hand, and I think that our constituents could understand that this is an interim warning with a comprehensive program to make significant repairs. If all we do is post signs and say this is a really bad problem, then I think it will certainly be received as disingenuous. So this is also presented as an alternative to using our resources to take out bike lanes that are valuable parts of our transportation network if we recognize that it's going to be a multi-year effort to make significant repairs to the system.
And, back to item 5 briefly in terms of the Bureau of Street Services estimate of $7.13 million for the, did you talk about, are we on 5 and 6? We're just on 5, okay, so 5, yes. The equipment, you're talking about $4.5 million for equipment, $2.6 million for staff. Was that? That's item 6. Okay, I have it wrong in my notes here. I'll wait. Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions on item 5, colleagues? No. Okay, so I'm going to recommend that we adopt the recommendations in the Joint Bureau of Street Services and LADOT report, that we instruct the Bureau of Street Services to prioritize a dedicated crew for large asphalt repairs in the funding cycle, which you have, at least in your request, and report back on the implementation plan for the use of the crews for repairs on the on-street bike network, as well as instruct DOT to develop a plan for the installation of the rough road warning signs on street segments that are currently not in a state of good repair, and report back on the cost to implement the program and how to limit it to only the very, not to have 4,400 signs, but to limit it to those that are a real risk, and ideally to have a plan, for every one of those signs to have a plan to go with it of when that street is going to be fixed, so that it doesn't become what Mr. O'Farrell is saying is something that gets mocked every year. After 10 years, it's still saying that. Seeing no objections, we'll move on. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 6.
Our last item, number 6, is a Bureau of Street Services report relative to the maintenance of the city's unimproved median islands.
Greg, Mr. Spots, we'll get you back up here, and as part of your thing, if you could, give us a little bit of a history lesson too. When and why did the city stop maintaining these unimproved median islands, and then go to your presentation.
Thank you. Yes, this is a topic I'm really passionate about. Greg Spots, Assistant Director of the Bureau of Street Services. I happen to oversee the 2 different divisions within Streets LA that handle medians. The irrigated medians are handled by Urban Forestry Division, and the unirrigated medians traditionally were handled by a division we used to have called the Lot Cleaning Division, and the last few of those staff that remained got merged into the Street Maintenance Division. The Lot Cleaning Division existed before the budget crisis, and they were like the cleaners of last resort. If there was some extraordinary event in the street, like illegal dumping or a truckload of something fell over, lot cleaning would show up with heavy equipment and clean it up. If there was an alley full with refuse, lot cleaning could go clean that up. And one of their responsibilities was taking care of this network of more than 4 million square feet of unimproved median islands, which can be anything from a 2-foot wide asphalt median that just separates traffic to a 20-foot wide median where if you let the weeds grow, you could almost have like a homeless encampment situation there, and we have those in CD6 in the Sepulveda Basin. We have them in South LA on some arterials like Main and Broadway. And so this staff was very important in keeping the appearance of the city looking good and preventing nuisances from occurring, because prolonged lack of maintenance at one of these locations, you can end up with plastic bags, hanging on to weeds. It can get quite unsightly or even unsanitary. And I'm sad to report that that's a service that never came back when the money came back. It's one of the only ones I know of in my 6.5-year tenure at Streets LA that not even one person was ever rehired to do that work when the 24 last people in the lot cleaning division were eliminated in 2011. And I think it's time for us to start considering developing a funded service for this. I really appreciate the chair bringing this forward, and actually we've worked closely with Councilmember O'Farrell on this issue for many years. There's many ways you could go about doing it, and there's many different service frequencies you could have, and our report was meant as really a preliminary first proposal. We were asked to make a proposal to do it with city forces as opposed to contracting it out. And so we came up with a proposal where we would have one crew in each of the 4 major geographic areas of the city: East Valley, West Valley, North Central, and Bay Harbor. And with those 4 crews, we would be able to visit all of these median types, the unimproved medians, quarterly. And then we could visit the ones that tend to grow a lot of weeds more frequently. Right about now is a time where you really want to be weeding these medians. When the super bloom is happening, that also means that weed season is upon us. And so this is a sort of a first draft of what kind of resources would be needed to take care of the median network. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great, thank you. No, I appreciate you bringing this forward, and I think it's really important to highlight these numbers so we can move forward on this issue. Let's talk about liabilities. Have we paid out liability claims specific to this since we discontinued the maintenance?
I would have to research that in conjunction with the city attorney. Our risk manager could do some research for you on that. I wouldn't be surprised if we have. I mean, there are cases where it becomes quite an extreme nuisance. I mean, you can have shopping carts hiding inside of weeds, and then pedestrians or cyclists or even cars could end up running into them. We have done one-off repairs for different council offices where the cleanup is extraordinary, after no maintenance for years.
I guess it's a leading question in the sense that I imagine, like you, that we probably have, and if we could get a handle on that, maybe that would help us justify the funding as something that's not only necessary, but it would be penny wise and pound foolish not to do, if indeed that's the case. And in fact, maybe we can even fund it as a liability prevention measure, potentially. So, also, regarding the proposal for staff and equipment, is there a reason why we can't use just existing crews or equipment for at least part of it? Does it have to always be its own separate thing?
Well, we're kind of in a state at the Bureau where we're growing fast, and we're sort of oversubscribed with tasks, and we don't have enough people, and we don't have enough equipment for those people because we scaled our fleet down during the budget crisis as well. So most of us, there's 4 of us assistant directors, and each of us are sort of scrambling to find enough people and equipment to get the existing work program completed, and that's why we use so much overtime as we supplement with the vacancies and the shortages of equipment by putting people out on the weekend, like we're trimming trees every weekend. So there really isn't a lot of spare capacity to vote to something new like this, unfortunately.
Well, that's another good thing for the upcoming budget, and we need to build capacity for sure. Now, if we did get it up and running, if the budget came out this week and there's plenty of money there, how long would it take before we could see the 4 million square feet of unimproved medians fully maintained?
Well, if we had it up and running, new positions that are created, the positions that are created by the budget process actually get created then in August by the Personnel Commission, who allocates you the positions, and then you can start the hiring process. So the soonest that you onboard those people is around Thanksgiving. So, it could be that, next spring's germination season, we would be having that under control as opposed to the way it is right now.
Colleagues? Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, question and a comment. The lot cleaning division of Bureau of Street Services was amazing, fantastic, and it made our neighborhoods look better. What would it cost just to bring a new iteration of that division back?
We actually thought through, that, and that somewhat informs what we've proposed here. And, what we've proposed here, those same people could be deployed on an ad hoc basis when council offices have a major issue. It would give us this, we have a limited capacity that we borrow in the street maintenance division, but for example, after the storms, we're still cleaning up some of the hillside sloughage, right? We don't have enough equipment operators and machinery and maintenance to get to all of them when we have an extensive storm season like this. But this would give us some all-purpose resources, heavy loaders and trucking pretty much, so that in addition to maintaining the unimproved medians, those same people and equipment could be sort of a strike force for you when you really need something often when it's unplanned, sanitation is great at picking up things as scheduled, and they move a tremendous amount of stuff as scheduled, but this group used to complement that by being able to surge on something that was unexpected. And if we had people and equipment like this, we would have much more capacity to help with those situations.
And Greg, you mentioned how many staffers did the lot cleaning division used to have? 20-something?
Well, it was more than 50.
More than 50.
And then the last group were the 24 positions that were eliminated in 10-11, and then only the supervisors were maintained, and we gradually merged them into the street maintenance division.
And even when that last unit was paid for, it was exponentially more than $7 million a year for over 20 people.
I'm not sure. I'd have to
Right?
go back
But
and take a look at it.
So in a way, this is you kind of said it already. You're taking a look at helping to accomplish what the lot clearing division once did, but in a much more austere manner, it sounds like.
And this is scalable, right? This is a first proposal based on a quarterly maintenance. It could be that at some point there were resources to have more people and do monthly maintenance. So we were trying to thread the needle on something that wasn't such a big bite that it would be really a deterrent to explore it.
And to the chair's point, I was going to talk about a little bit about the monies for equipment and staff as well. There's not, for example, one of the asks is $40,000 for a new pickup truck. There's not an existing pickup truck and fleet services somewhere that you could just start utilizing instead?
There's a shortage of pickup trucks within Streets LA right now. There are supervisors who don't have a pickup truck right now. So there isn't any, at least equipment assigned to our agency, our 1,150-person agency. There are not available pickup trucks for new tasks. Like, we are renting all kinds of different equipment to accommodate new positions that have come on in the last 2 or 3 years.
So you're already renting or leasing equipment?
We are.
With existing staff?
Yes.
For existing work duties?
Often we do that to bridge to when the long-term permanent equipment can come in. For example, the 55 forestry positions that you all helped us with. I have crews out there right now working because I'm renting some towers while we wait for the year-long lead time for the new towers we're buying for them.
Great. Thank you.
Ms. Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this proposal that you have, if we were to go through with the proposal and for all the staff and equipment at the $7.1 million, then that means BSS will be able to maintain all 14 million square feet of median islands?
That's right. The 10 million square feet are irrigated, and we're currently contracting those out. And we were asked to come up with an in-house staff proposal for maintaining these medians, and this configuration that we're putting forth would allow quarterly visits. Now, the irrigated ones are getting visited every 2 weeks. I mean, if you water it, you're going to get lots of growth, and you need mowers, and you have to mow it. So this is a very different assignment than that. But yeah, this would enable us to finally embrace the entire median population and have regular maintenance.
Okay. And the report also stated that there will be as-needed visits available by your staff if you're fully funded. How will that work? Is it just by complaints or district allotment?
So we would have supervisors who over time, just like our new bike lane supervisors are learning the bike lane network in their area, we'd have supervisors who would become experts in the inventory of medians in their geographic quadrant of the city, and they would start to develop a maintenance schedule for the weed and trash issues. So we would have enough capacity to go beyond a quarterly frequency for those medians that need it more often.
What about new medians? So, because our current policy for new medians is we don't take liability of it, right? For new medians, because I know when I have several communities in my district who wants to adopt a median or create a new median, a turnaround circle or something like that, and the city doesn't want to take responsibility or liability of it because clearly we don't have enough resources.
For irrigated new medians, we can add them to the maintenance contracts if the mayor and council provide us with the incremental, like 26 cents per square foot that we would need to maintain them. So Our current policy under our current director is that we can add irrigated medians if the funding comes along with it.
What about non-irrigated medians?
Generally, people aren't looking to add those because it's not a great community beautification. Like, I'm not sure the last time there was a community group that was seeking to put in a median where the vegetation wasn't getting any water.
I have a few. So, well,
if we had this capacity, we could consider it in that same way. We could come up with a cost per square foot and, provide a little bit of incremental resources to handle new medians of that type as well.
Well, this was a very informative report, and thank you for that.
Thank you. So I'm going to recommend that we note and file, but we also make a recommendation that directs Streets LA to work with the city attorney to determine if the amount that's been paid out in liability claims could help justify the unapproved median island maintenance crew and equipment. So to look at that as we discussed and potentially use that as a justification and perhaps way to get the funding.
Thank you.
So just a report back on the liability costs and how that could factor in. And with that, I believe, I know we have one general public comment card. That's item 6. There's no other additional items, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All the items. So we have Rhonda Tesse. Is she here? She signed up for general public comment. Maybe Mr. Spindler and Mr. Herman added a whole bunch, and I tried to get rid of all the ones that were clearly fake. But I don't know if this one's real or not. So Ms. Tesse does not appear to be here or may not indeed be a real person. So with that, anything else on the agenda?
The desk is clear.
What's that?
The desk is clear.
The desk is clear. This meeting is adjourned.